can pick up.
Okay, fantastic. So welcome back, colleagues, after lunch. It's exciting to introduce the next presentation. It's a co-presentation, and Sisanda will be sharing her presentation, or the presentation from her side for the entire duration. What I would like is if John, when he does present, if he could then just share his camera for a few seconds, even if it's after the presentation, just so that we do then see your face, because we are in the online setting. So just so that we have the title of the presentation, which is entitled How the Move to Online Work is Changing Journalism Internship Programs. So it's John Bulani and Sisanda Nkwala. And I will now hand over without further ado. Everything of the best. Colleagues, please put your questions in the chat box, and I will signal to you when you have 5 minutes remaining. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Lauren, and thanks, colleagues, for coming through to this presentation. My name is Sisanda Nkwala. I'm a lecturer in the media department in the journalism program, and my co-presenter who will be joining us soon is Mr. John Bulani, who is the world coordinator in the department. So I'll stop sharing my video now and just reshare my screen. I think if I can kindly request, I see my colleague, Dr. Trust Matsilela is on the line. If he is able to just WhatsApp John the link from the journalism Facebook group so that he can get it, because I think he's struggling to get the link.
Yes, Sandra.
Okay, awesome.
Oh.
Okay, then. So I've already just introduced you, John, and you can then start the presentation. I will share the screen on my end.
Okay, just following the rules, just for 30 seconds. So, okay. Afternoon, colleagues. My name is John Bulani, and I'll be presenting on remote work integrated learning, which is the reflections of journalism students. Okay, I can switch off. So the first part is to look at journalism, which is pre-COVID-19. So just as in practice, so journalism is the activity of gathering, assessing, and creating, and also presenting news and information. So it is also the product of these activities. At its core, it's the interaction between journalists and news sources or members of public. The main point is to give the voice to the voiceless, and also to speak the truth to power by holding leaders accountable on behalf of citizens. So pre-COVID, a huge part of what journalism entails was also the face-to-face interaction with sources, recognizing that communication, which is the key way in which journalism operates, is best in person, which is the interaction between journalists and also the public or sources for stories. So if we look at journalism now, the shutdown of the lockdown necessitated took away the one cornerstone of journalism, which is the in-person interaction with people. So overnight, the news gathering approaches changed. So even though journalists were deemed to be essential service providers, the people they needed to do their jobs, namely, which is the ministers, the public, and the other key informants, were also kept away from them. So, and also they had to get information they needed through mediated platforms such as your Google Meet, your Zoom, and WhatsApp. And also even other entities, they still do that when conducting whether it's briefings. So, and also another second part is also fake news. So the pandemic itself also prompted a proliferation of fake news, which is indirectly cast a shadow on journalism in society, as everyone is suddenly an expert in what the real COVID figures are, and also the trustworthiness of news media is questioned. So the impact also of the pandemic in the media space, it has also greatly affected the small community media space itself. So according to the Association of Independent Newspapers, which represent the small community papers, they've lost around about 80% of their revenue on average, with 80 community newspapers also closing down. So meaning that the local voices, those publication communities are no longer there, some of them. So they've been also affected by the impact of COVID-19. So as we look at the changes in the industry, also it forces, or it also results in changes in academia, which is what we're arguing in this paper with Sisanda. So meaning that the changes in practice, we look at that, which is news gathering has changed, thus curriculum also needs to change. So, and also we look at changes in place of journalism. The fake news has also introduced the distrust in the place of journalism in society. And also lastly, which is the changes of placements of journalists. So we've seen a significant number of job losses in various industries. And also this means that placements of students needs to change, because I know is that in 2019, myself and Sisanda, we introduced a mentorship also to find a new way to do the work integrated approach to get our students also to still be part of, to learn and also practice in the industry, to get some experience as part of the learning. So, Sisanda, would you touch on literature?
Thank you, John. So with our study in looking at how remote working is impacting will, we looked at the literature on how will has changed in recent years, particularly in the last 2 years. And what the literature shows is that the changes in the economy in recent years, even prior to COVID, have seen notable innovations in approaches to work integrated learning. While work integrated learning is still grounded in the view that workplaces provide particular and unique kinds of experiences which support student learning in ways in which other circumstances might not be able to, work integrated learning is no longer just placement-based experiences. It has been reconceptualized to include different approaches that entail practice-based, work-based, authentic learning experiences for students. Volini and his colleagues argue that while ideas such as increase to remote working or greater reliance on digital communication has been dealt with, the impact of COVID-19 saw these trends accelerated at a pace never seen before. Of course, not all workplaces were impacted by COVID in the same way. Industries like the journalism industry are among those most impacted for reasons that we have highlighted so far. I think, for example, in how before we had to, when we teach students how to conduct interviews, it has been about building that in-person rapport with sources. Overnight, we suddenly had to introduce conducting interviews virtually and how they need to coach their sources on positioning camera, etc. And the complexity then emerged because while we as education are also undergoing changes, namely from teaching in person to online, the field itself is undergoing changes, which means that our curriculum not only changes in terms of what is delivered, but in how it is delivered. Students' perceptions of their will experiences have previously been examined, but there's little literature investigating students' perceptions on remote work integrated learning and how host organizations can support learning in remote contexts, which we are seeing more and more of. Kay et al. Created a framework for flexible and future-orientated will programs, and virtual will was identified as part of that framework. Things like internships, which is a type of virtual will where students and teams are connected virtually while working remotely, have been implemented and evaluated somewhat in the literature. And the findings suggest that students develop the skills to the same extent in some respects as in-person internships. Though previous research has outlined the benefits and drawbacks of remote working, there is still very little that really brings forward the voices of students and their experiences. Specifically, what we identified is a gap when it comes to in-depth qualitative work on students generally in terms of their thoughts and feelings surrounding remote working to understand the factors affecting the quality of the remote work experience. So To this end, then, we have sought to explore how the move to online work in journalism and online education in journalism education should shape and is shaping journalism internship programs, and to see how these changes can and should be incorporated into the curriculum. The move to online work in this field, like I said, literally happened overnight. 1 minute, my curriculum was talking about interviewing and building in-person rapport. The next day, it had to change to talk about how to conduct meaningful, in-depth interviews on Zoom. Through this research project, which is still ongoing, our hope is to identify what those needs and perspectives of students are, and then to see if we can develop a framework that will guide other journalism programs, particularly in relation to work integrated learning. John, I'll hand over to you to talk about our methodology.
Thanks, Sandra. So let's start on the aim, Sandra. So
I've just done the aim, John.
Okay, sure. So the study, it's a qualitative study which employs the grounded theory approach to come up with the key characteristics of this new phenomenon of remote work integrated learning in the journalism education. So the data we use 3 tools, which is the focus groups with the students, 10 out of the 28 registered students who are currently doing their will. And also we've interviewed the host organizations, the mentors, and also supervisors within these companies. And also the third one is a document analysis, which is students, they submit reports of their will reports. So currently with that reviewing those reports. So we can move, Susanda.
So using then a grounded theory approach, we have generated particular themes that are emerging. Like, because our study is still ongoing, these are our preliminary findings that we are sharing with you this afternoon. And we've categorized them into 3 main areas. Firstly, the student's sense of self. As they do their work integrated learning, students are getting a sense of who they are becoming as journalists and how remote working is shaping that sense of self. Secondly, there were findings related to the students' relationships with journalists or professionals that they worked with, which we said were seniors. And here it was reflections on how are they relating to professional journalists, given the fact that they are working remotely and not in person. And then the final set of findings relate to their reflections on where the journalism sector is headed. These speak broadly to what students see as maybe areas where the curriculum that they went through needs to adjust to accommodate the remote way of working in journalism and the remote way of learning and teaching in journalism education. So looking at the first set of findings, namely the student's sense of self, one of the key things that students said is that this experience of remote will has developed and exposed an ability to work independently for them, and in so doing reassured them that they have what it takes to be a journalist. And this is important because often when students do internships, there is, especially with like a short-term internship where they haven't yet graduated and they still are effectively students, there's really a sense of not feeling like you are really whatever the profession is. So in this case, a journalist. But here, because they were working independently and they were doing things by themselves and seeing the fact that they could do it, their reflection was that this remote work context really gave them confidence that they have what it takes to be a journalist. So this one student said, I would say working independently and knowing that when I know something, I really know, and that I don't depend on other people in order to know how to do it and to always ask them to assist me. I know even though I don't get it right, nobody will be able to put pressure on you that you want to get things right. Most of the work, I would say, I learned how to do online. And so there's that self-directed learning that's happening even in the work context. This is striking because internship programs really have been found to be periods where students are sometimes broken down because the work context is not conducive for them because they are still students and yet they are operating in that professional space. Now, because they are not judged on the basis of who they are, but what they can deliver, these participants said this experience had aspects that affirmed them.
Colleagues, we have less than 5 minutes.
Are you serious? Okay, so let me just, then we will not move on to the other two themes, but I think this one is also quite interesting. A lot of students spoke about how the fact that they could show up to work and show up in inverted commas in their pajamas was actually an advantage. And this speaks to the fact that when students appear in the workplace, that pressure of needing to dress to impress or needing to put on appearances that purport to sell a sense of professionalism is stripped away in the work context, and it becomes about what they deliver. And this as well attests to the affirming aspects of remote working. There are other areas which then I think in the paper John and I will write on that colleagues can maybe look at, speak about the challenges they face when it comes to relating to professional journalists because that face-to-face interaction is gone, but also the fact that the communication abilities are strengthened because all they have is technology to mediate relationships. And then finally, reflections around the sector. Really don't have any time to go into it. But the overall conclusion that we arrive at is that will definitely in journalism has changed because the industry has changed. And I think we as this field can be an example for other fields to emulate on how to adjust going forward, because we've been forced to basically change the curriculum overnight. Thank you very much. We'll take any questions if colleagues have.
Thank you for this insightful. I'm sorry when I alerted you that you then had to go into some sort of an overdrive, but it does then give you more time to engage with the colleagues in the room. So what I want to do is to go straight into Sia's question. It's a comment and a bit of a question, but I'd really like to give the time. It says, why are you looking at the perceptions about the program, not what they are able to do after completing virtual or remote world program? You may want to explore this at a later stage. Work integrated learning entails checking whether they are able to demonstrate what is taught in an open society, other than closed spaces like university, virtual spaces where variables are more controlled. So I think if Sia is still in the room, what would be good is if he would like to elaborate maybe where I was a bit short in opening up that comment.
Sure. But firstly, I must congratulate you for this interesting study, because it speaks to the nature of the field. But as I've tried to raise within the question there, the role of vocational professional programs is actually to check whether the students are able to show what is taught within the university in practice, where there is open society, where there are many variables at play, rather than closed spaces like our university and virtual spaces. So my question is, why are you focusing on their perceptions? Because these are perceptions about the program, not the impact of the program on what they are able to do, to think and be after completing it. Thanks.
Thanks, Sia. I think your question actually, it's a pity that we we didn't use the traditional inverted pyramid approach where we start with the most hard-hitting findings. Because as we go and look at the relationship with seniors and their perceptions of the industry and how they were prepared for the industry, we definitely do go into that. The other point that you make, which I think is really helpful, is the need to make this a longitudinal study. So this cohort is the first cohort of journalism students where the full group has done remote will to some or other degree. So it would be good to track them from here to see maybe a year from now, do they still have these reflections 2 years from now, and to do a longitudinal study, I think would definitely be beneficial. So it's a pity we couldn't go into our findings around what their perceptions of the sector and how the journalism curriculum prepared them for the changes that are happening in the sector. John, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you've covered most of it, and I know I'm okay on my side.
Thank you very much, Sisanda. I'm looking forward to that study. And I've asked in your faculty about some transformation programs. I didn't get a thing.
I'm here for my study.
Sorry to embarrass you in this space.
I will not claim to speak for my faculty, but yeah, I think you often bring this up.
Email.
So yeah.
So, off the record.
Colleagues, I just want to say that you're bringing to light so many things. You think about the students' home environment. Is it conducive? Is it noisy? Is it cramped? Is it congested? You think about, are they missing out? When we did our world internships, we were the gophers, and we learned, the cross-pollination. We had our ear to the ground, and we heard what people were saying, what they were talking, what was the lexicons and the lingos. You think of all these things, but you're also very aware of the fact that we are in a new situation. So tell me some of the things that went through your mind in the conceptualization of the study, and also in your conceptualization of what this new curriculum might look like, knowing that the curriculum is not just limited to content. We're thinking of assessment, we're thinking of content, we're thinking of infrastructure, we're thinking of so many things. So I'm throwing quite a lot at you, but I'm really interested in what your thoughts are.
Look, I think in terms of conceptualizing the study, it really emerged because we were confronted with the fact that literally within a week of lockdown, I couldn't teach what I normally teach because it had changed. And so it was a matter of thinking about, if this is what's happening in the classroom, how are students going to experience it when they go out to work? And how do we keep pace with that change? We also had input from our advisory board to really look at how industry has changed and then be responsive to it. So that was the issue that gave impetus to the study. I can't remember the other aspects of the question. John, do you have something you want to add?
Yes, I think on the part of the curriculum part. So some of the companies or media agencies we work with is BizNews. So in my engagement with them, I think it's also part of the study while we're doing the focus group part, is that because they've been in the virtual space for quite some time in terms of publishing and also doing business in the space. So what they are doing for coming next year, infusing our curriculum, especially for my module, is that they are developing a curriculum that they've been using how to work online. So meaning that students will be prepared before they go for their internships in July until December in terms of the environment itself. So meaning that bit by bit, I think when we argue that we want the curriculum to change, I think it's more baby steps for now, that we're trying to infuse it in our curriculum, Susanda or any other colleague, in terms of how do we shift to the virtual space, also in terms to prepare our students for this new phenomenon.
And I think just one last thing also to add around the curriculum that really has come through in the views, particularly expressed by the host organizations, is a need to move away from a skills-based journalism curriculum to a curriculum that emphasizes, or a hard skills-based journalism curriculum, to a curriculum that emphasizes soft skills. So where we teach students, I mean, students learn TV production for 3 years. They are saying, actually do that in a semester and then focus on creativity and agility and, you know, all those softer skills, because that is what is happening in the industry now. We don't need expert camera people. We need people that have the basics, but can then employ those skills across the board, which is unusual for journalism. In the past, if you were a TV journalist, that's all you did. If you were a print journalist, that's all you did. Now it's across platforms, and it's about a person who can maneuver across those platforms. So that's definitely something that is helpful, because it influences literally what we'll be teaching and shaping next year. There is a question from...
Thank you so much, colleagues. Unfortunately, I have to be that person that has to cut it there. There is a question from in the chat from Trust. May I ask you to please attend to it in the chat box so that I can stop the recording and then hand over to the next speaker and chair. So I will stop the recording now. Frederica can get ready, and the next speaker. Thank you. That was an incredible presentation from John and Sisanda. Thank you so much.